Blinding me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome for joining us. You're joining us for JOFA's webinar with Debra Bans. We've been lucky enough to do a series of webinars with Debra every few months, and we're really excited to have to be doing another one with Debra in light of the book that came out just this month. For those of you who aren't as familiar with our work, JOFA is the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. We're an organization that's committed to expanding opportunities for women in the Orthodox community, whether that be in leadership roles, in ritual, or in learning. We have a host of programs that we do. We have a lot of online learning opportunities. You can follow us on social media. You can read our blog, which is hosted on My Jewish Learning. Just last week, we had a panel conversation about preventing all-male panels. You can find the resources for that on our website. And our flagship event is coming up in January 14th and 15th, MLK weekend. We're having our conference. It brings together over 1,000 people. And it's a place where members of the community and leaders really come together to talk about hot button issues and chart the course of the future of modern Orthodoxy. Debra, I'm so glad that we can be doing this, even though I'm in New York, you're in DC. It's quite exciting.
It's wonderful.
So I just wanted to take a minute to introduce Debra, and then we'll get started. Debra has been using her love for manuscripts and biblical studies to use art to illuminate Jewish texts. She holds a BA from Concordia University and an MS in political science from MIT, but she turned her full attention to Hebrew manuscripts in 1987. Debra is the artist and author of The Song of Songs, The Honeybee in the Garden, I Will Wake the Dawn, Illuminated Psalms, and Arise, Arise, Deborah, Ruth, and Hannah. Her newest book, which came out this month, Kabbalat Shabbat, The Grand Unification, features new translations and literary commentaries by Dr. Raymond P. Scheinlin, and a foreword by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, and a preface by Arthur Green. Debra has been partnering with JOFA on a number of projects, including these webinars. Her works tour museums and galleries across the United States. Debra lectures frequently on her work across the United States in Jewish and in Christian venues. Debra has lived throughout the United States and Canada, and she's currently residing in Washington, D.C. But thankfully, we can use this platform to work with you even when we're in geographically different locations.
Terrific.
So without further ado, let's start the webinar. I'm going to share my screen with you now so that you guys can see the slides.
Wonderful. There we go. That's super, Shira. It's lovely to be with you all tonight. Hi. Now, we're in the month of Elul, which is not only the name of this month, during which we prepare to join with the Almighty during the high holidays, but it's also the acronym for the beloved phrase from the Song of Songs, Ani l'dodi v'dodi li, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Elul is our month of love, and I'd like to share some thoughts about the feminine aspects of divine love, how that love channels into our world as wisdom, and its implications for our traditions from my just published book, Kabbalat Shabbat, The Grand Unification. Now, before I say another word, I have to express my gratitude to Sharon and Steve Lieberman for their support of this project altogether. Next slide, please. Can we get to the Eshet Chayil slide? There we go. Perfect. Okay. Now, my much beloved late first husband, David, was an astrophysicist who's deeply learned in the Jewish sources and had been raised and educated within the Lithuanian Jewish, the Litvak rationalist tradition. On Friday evenings, with family and friends gathered round and me seated beside him, every now and then he would come to the point of singing Eshet Chayil, a powerful woman, don a sweetly innocent expression and puzzle, Eshet Chayil, me and Sa, or a woman of valor, who can find one? Emphasis on the question mark. Now, David loved me deeply, was passionately supportive of my work, appreciated my reasonably orderly household, and enjoyed my cooking, and so he generally followed his mischievous quip by reassuring everyone present that he wasn't insulting his wife, But the Eshet Chayil had little to do with praising the actual woman of the house. Instead, its recitation related to the Kabbalistic comparison of wisdom to a woman. And as a good Litvak, he had no truck with Kabbalah. Now, personal note, it's nice to be able to add here that my new and wonderful husband, Michael, is fascinated by Kabbalah. So he's just fine with this. But David was partially right, at least about the origin of the metaphor. The tradition includes Eshet Chayil among our Kabbalat Shabbat customs, not so much to honor the specific homemaker. After all, how many of us really do spend our days buying vineyards, unless you're in Napa, but rather to celebrate the role of divine wisdom personified as a woman and seen in the woman of the house in the Tikkun Olam, the healing of the world, to which we aspire as Shabbat arrives. How did the comparison of wisdom to woman come about? How has this metaphor shaped the traditions of Kabbalat Shabbat? Now, tonight, we're going to explore these questions and trace the development of this comparison of wisdom to a woman from its biblical roots through the Lurianic mysticism that gave birth to our Friday evening rituals. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, now, the biblical view of wisdom in creation isn't quite what we in our own era expect. Let's back up in time a little bit and look at some of the characterizations of divine wisdom in creation. I'm going to read you a little bit of Psalm 104, which presents a wisdom-oriented view of creation and connects closely with our own understanding. The paintings you see here are from my second book, I Will Wake the Dawn, Illuminated Psalms. So let me read just a little bit of this very long, really beautiful psalm. Bless the Lord, O my souls. This is one of the Borchi Nafshi Psalms. O Lord, my God, you are very great. You are clothed in glory and majesty, wrapped in a robe of light. I'm going to jump ahead now to where the psalmist is describing the earth and the oceans. So that it shall never totter, mountains rising, valleys sinking to the place you established for them. You set bounds they must not pass, so that they never again cover the earth. You make springs gush forth in torrents. They make their way between the hills, giving drink to all the wild beasts. The wild asses slake their thirst. The birds of the sky dwell beside them and sing among the foliage. You water the mountains from your lofts. The earth is sated from the fruit of your work. So here we have a sense of divine wisdom expressed in the exquisite order of the creation we celebrate on Shabbat. Next slide, please. Back to Eshet Chayil. Okay, now Proverbs, the book of Mishlei, whose last verses we chant as Eshet Chayil, a powerful woman, was probably redacted somewhere around the 2nd century BCE, a major Jewish text within the broad tradition of wisdom literature that spanned the Hellenistic world. So what is wisdom? How does wisdom reveal herself in the world? Now, we're not going to go into a full analysis of this in all classical Jewish texts. That's way more than we can do tonight. But let's explore some fundamental characteristics so that we might understand the role of wisdom in Kabbalat Shabbat traditions. We're going to go back again to consider Eshet Chayil itself shortly, but right now, let's consider a biblical passage that's key to understanding the figure of woman as wisdom, and that we especially reflect in the Kabbalat Shabbat services. Next slide. Thanks. Okay, you can read along with me. In the 8th chapter of Mishlei, Proverbs, wisdom describes her ancient and loving companionship with God. Let's read it together. The Lord created me at the beginning of his course, as the first of his works of old. In the distant past I was fashioned, at the beginning, at the origin of the earth. There was still no deep when I was brought forth, no springs rich in water. Before the foundations of the mountains were sunk, before the hills I was born. He had not yet made earth and fields or the world's first clumps of clay. I was there when he set the heavens into place, when he fixed the horizon upon the deep, when he made the heavens above firm and the fountains of the deep gush forth, when he assigned the sea its limits so that its waters never transgress his command. When he fixed the foundations of the earth, I was with him as a confidant, a source of delight every day, rejoicing before him at all times, rejoicing in his inhabited world, finding delight with humankind. So, wisdom is a woman, God's earliest and most enduring companion, who not only attends the divine, but finds delight in her relationship with humankind. She resides in heaven and on earth. She bridges the realms of the divine and the human. And indeed, the Hebrew word for wisdom, chokhmah, is an expressly feminine word. Nowadays, in secular contexts, we tend to interpret the concept of wisdom as pertaining to matters of a deep intellectual, philosophical, theological, or psychological nature, all abstracts. For instance, as a homemaker, a woman may be a wise mother in terms of how she handles her kids' moral development, but she's a skilled or talented cook. The hands-on practicalities are skills or talents, but not wisdom. The biblical concept of wisdom is even broader than that, though, including not only matters of mind, but also skilled material craftsmanship and household or business management. And we see all of these ideas reflected in examples of wisdom across the Tanakh and in the Jewish mystical tradition that so closely draws inspiration and authority from its biblical sources. So let's look at some of the appearances that wisdom makes in Tanakh. The first use of the term wisdom, chokhmah, in Tanakh, occurs in the later part of Breshit, Genesis, when Pharaoh searches for a man of discernment and wisdom, navon v'chacham in Hebrew, to interpret his disturbing dreams. And he's then told about Joseph, who's languishing in prison. The wisdom with which Joseph analyzes the dreams involves psychology and prophecy, which he then puts to use with solid agricultural and business management skills. Move to the next book, Exodus, Shemot, and we see Moses appoint the human designer for the Mishkan, the traveling ark. And Moses said to the Israelites, "See, the Lord has singled out by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehudah. He has endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, chacham lev, ability and knowledge in every kind of craft, and has inspired him to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting, and to carve wood, to work in every kind of designer's craft, and to give directions, and so on and so forth." Now, tellingly, the translators here, this is, again, the new JPS translation from 1985. Translators interpret chacham lev, literally a wise heart, as spirit of skill. For this kind of wisdom resides in the talents to design, make, build, and manage material objects, sacred but material nonetheless in the terrestrial world. And that's the kind of stuff we call skill. But God soon provides directions for the structure and decorations for the Mishkan, but it's Bezalel who fills in the details and implements those instructions, designs and directs the manufacture of the textiles and the cherub decorated ark and the golden almond blossoms on the menorah with his own God-given intelligence and skills. Now, although God-given, as we often regard as special geniuses, for instance, Wolfgang Amadeus, beloved of God Mozart, Bezalel's skills reside firmly in the material world. But his work, of course, would become a conduit for the divine presence into the human sphere. Next slide, please. Super. Now, following the lead of biblical texts such as Proverbs 8 and 31, 31 is Eshet Chayil, and again, we're going to get back to that in depth in a moment. The Jewish mystical tradition infused the Kabbalat Shabbat liturgy and customs with the idea that the Shekhinah, the divine aspect most accessible to the human world, you can see it down at the bottom here, the most direct conduit of divine wisdom into the world is feminine. It's this metaphor that creates the image of the Shabbat queen, the Shabbat bride, that inspires the erotic undercurrent of this evening when the relationship between man and woman in their Sabbath-observing home heals the torn divine world. Here you see the classical chart showing the descent and relationships of each of the 10 sefirot, the emanations or qualities of God, that each carry masculine or feminine attribution, and that channel divine energy through creation from the highest, most remote essence of the divine at the top, Keter, down toward the feminine Shekhinah, the point that links the heavenly and material worlds. Now, the festival of Shavuot, the anniversary of the giving and reception of the Torah, represents an annual mystical reenactment of the marriage among the Sefirot, which is facilitated by Jews' observance of the law. Now, the Zohar's description of the courtly nuptials on Erev Shavuot, uniting the heavenly bride Shekhinah at bottom and the groom Tiferet, you can see Tiferet in the middle, emphasizes the importance of the human role in restoring the unity of these aspects of divinity, and relates very closely to ideas about Shabbat. Just take a listen. This is a bit of Zohar, and it's really quite wonderful to read. So, Rabbi Shimon was sitting and was engaged in Torah study on the night when the divine bride, Shekhinah, is joined in sexual union with her husband, Tiferet. For we have been taught that all the members of the palace of the bride, during the night preceding the day that the bride will be invited under the chuppah with her husband, need to keep her company all night. This is the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and to rejoice with her in the preparation, the Tikkun, that she is making. They do this by engaging in the study of the Torah, proceeding from the Pentateuch, the Chumash, to the prophets, the Nevi'im, from the prophets to the I can never say this word, Hagiographia, the Ketuvim, and then to the midrashic interpretations of scripture and to the mysteries of wisdom, the Kabbalah. For these represent her preparations and her adornments. She comes in with her maidens and remains at their head. She adorns herself through them and rejoices with them all that night. On the next day, she enters the wedding canopy only in their company, for they are called the attendants of the canopy, the chuppah. When she enters the wedding canopy, the Holy One, blessed be He, asks about them, blesses them, and crowns them with a bridal crown. Happy is their lot. So, the Zohar's account of the divine marriage relates very closely to the basis of the Lurianic Kabbalat Shabbat ritual, and it applies a very human and medieval courtly love kind of image to the Godhead. The attributes of God are mythologized as a woman and a man on the verge of marriage, the observant scholarly Jew as the necessary attendant to the bride, and humanity takes an active part in this divine marriage. Without her human attendant's proper observance, the Shekhinah would be bereft, perhaps even unable to go to her marriage in full dignity. So here we have in a nutshell the evolution of the Jewish mystical envisioning of wisdom as a woman. The image of a female wisdom as God's oldest companion, reveling in friendship with humankind, as we saw before in Proverbs 8, is the one that we celebrate as we draw toward us the lights of the Shabbat candles, make Kiddush over wine, and enjoy the festive meal that we sing of in so many of the Shabbat table songs. Next slide, please. Super. Okay. I love the Kabbalistic notion of how we draw divine wisdom into the world on Shabbat. And that begins as we usher in Shabbat by lighting the candles. In fact, in my own private prayer after blessing Shabbat candles, I ask for wisdom for guiding my family and to imbue my work. In these illuminations, I express the exchange of prayer and light between the heavens above and the human world below as we inaugurate Shabbat with candlelight and begin to draw divine wisdom down to our material realm. So let's look at the legal origins and theology underlying our candlelighting practice, and then into the ideas about candlelighting expressed in the paintings. So first, a few words about the origin and mystical role of candlelighting. The ritual began in Mishnaic times, that is, during the period of the first codification of Jewish law, during the first 2 centuries of the Common Era. And it was begun simply to light the Shabbat table so that the family could relax and enjoy their festive meal at leisure, well lit. The author of the 17th century mystical tract, Chemdat Yamim, suggests that the light from the Shabbat candles adds to the neshama yetera, the additional soul that flowers within the soul of every Jew during Shabbat. Since the neshama yetera descends from the feminine Shekhinah, remember the lowest of the Sefirot, the one that communicates with our world, the woman of the house enjoys the privilege of lighting the candles, thus reenacting the unification of the human and divine spheres, of the Sefirot themselves. And the pleasure of the candlelight extends to all who celebrate Shabbat within it. Chemdat Yamim, in fact, compares the candlelight that reaches toward heaven to Jacob's ladder, suggesting that the light gladdens and blesses the hearts of all it illuminates. At right, the Hebrew painting presents my grandmother's and mother's silver candlesticks within a design presenting depictions of sources of light and human understandings of the cosmos. The blue and gold motif representing the Shefa, the divine energy flowing throughout the universe, and it's on every painting in this book. Here you can see it in the candle flames. We view the candles against the dusk sky lit by the setting sun, while the ever-evolving deep sky wheels far above our heads and homes. The geometric pattern surrounding the words of the blessing is a classical Moorish pattern that was part of the visual surroundings of the Sephardic community. This pattern expresses the flow of all geometric form from a single point, symbolizing the origin of the entire universe in the Creator whose work and rest we celebrate on Shabbat. Now you can see that the illumination is edged by 2 borders of decorative calligraphy. You can't read them here in the slides though. The outer band in blue offers a Yemenite Techina, a women's devotional poem for women to say while enjoying the light of the candles. And this was collected by the 20th century Yemenite rabbi Yosef Kapach. Let me read it to you, it's lovely. "O my master, save us and deliver us and have mercy upon us, and have mercy upon my children and their father. Imbue them with wisdom, elevate their path, and smooth their life's trails. Grant them favor and acceptance, endow them with complete health, and fulfill their wishes. Keep troubled times from them, and allow no tormentor or enemy to prevail over them. Guide them in your way to observe the Torah." The inner band in green presents a famous medieval view of how the human soul reflects divine radiance. In his philosophical work in verse, I love this, The Royal Crown, the 11th century Spanish poet and philosopher Solomon ibn Gaviral attempts to reconcile Torah with the Neoplatonic thought of his own day, exploring ideas of the flow of divine energy through the cosmos, how divine energy flows from God through the stars and planets inward toward the earth. It's very short. Let me read it to you. It's gorgeous. "You are the light of the upper regions, and the eye of every soul that's pure will take you in. And the clouds of sin in the sinner's soul will obscure you. Your invisible light in the world will be seen in the world to come on the mountain of God." Now, the illumination at left surrounds the English translation of the blessing with similar geometric and astronomical imagery. The green band of decorative text presents the English translation of Ibn Gabiral's description of divine light, while the blue band presents a passage from a Techina to be recited after candlelighting by the 19th century German rabbi's daughter and poet, Fanny Neude. Shabbat is the crown and the glorious ornament of the week. It ennobles our aspirations, consecrates our enjoyment, pours soft, heavenly light across our pilgrim path on earth, and carries us back to you whenever weekday aspirations remove us from you. We look up to, O God, with pure confidence in love and humility. Every thought of you lifts the veil from our eyes. The light increases within our souls, and so on. Next slide, please. Okay, back we are finally to Eshet Chayil properly. Now, the piyut itself, again, which is Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 31, presents an image of a woman who excels in both spheres, household and business management and moral character, both matters of mind and material. It's this woman that the Lurianic tradition likened to the female wisdom of Proverbs 8 and used to praise wisdom's contribution to the Shabbat home. It's worth noting here that the homemaker of this particular passage of Proverbs is, alas, very far from the default image of woman in Proverbs. Now, this very chapter begins as a king's mother cautions him, do not give your strength to women, in the same breath that she warns him against drunkenness. The praiseworthy homemaker of the piyut is presented as the exception, a powerful woman who can find one. Her worth would be far beyond pearls. So here I've presented the Eshet Chayil, the powerful woman, as a strong oak tree. The night my grandmother died, and she summed up everything about the Eshet Chayil for me and all our family, as well as her London and Durban communities. And her dining room table now, in fact, is my own Shabbat table. Anyway, the night she passed away, I spent that night doing an Eshet Chayil picture about her, using the oak tree image. One of my favorite passages in the little Talmudic ethical tract, Pirkei Avot, compares the truly wise person to a tree that has not only a big showy leaf canopy, but also strong, if invisible, roots that anchor it and nourish it through any adversity. And Isaiah prophesied that Israel would be reborn after conquest by Assyria like the oak, which he noted could grow again from only a stump. It's this strong, flourishing tree that I painted here. Its canopy housing all kinds of birds and small animals, many of which some of you may recognize from my earlier books. Its trunk supporting roses and grapes, its roots sheltering the perfumed myrrh used in the temple incense, the fragrant pink lilies that in Midrash symbolize the value of the 10 Commandments in the imperfect human world, while the gazelle, a symbol of human and divine love in Hebrew Bible and medieval Sephardi poetry, aside, reminding us of the undying love between Israel and the divine, between the masculine and feminine aspects of divinity, and between man and woman, as we welcome divine wisdom to our Shabbat tables. Next slide, please. Thanks, that's great. Okay, the notion of the flow of wisdom into the world flows also into the Kabbalistic understanding of Friday night Kiddush. So let's explore that flow and how it relates to women's relationship to making Kiddush. Let's first review what Kiddush says. See whether it doesn't remind you, let's look at it as a poem, and see whether it doesn't remind you of the wisdom view of creation in Psalm 104. Evening came and morning came, the sixth day. The sky, the earth, and all their vast contents were completed. By the seventh day, God had finished all the work that he had done, and so he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. He blessed the seventh day and set it apart as holy, for that was when he rested from making all the things that God created. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who created the fruit of the vine. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who set us apart by his commandments, was pleased with us, and made his holy Sabbath ours in love and pleasure, a remembrance of the work of creation. Indeed, it's the first of all holy festivals, a remembrance of the exodus from Egypt. Indeed, you chose us and set us apart among the nations and made your holy Sabbath ours in love and pleasure. Blessed are you, Lord, who makes the Sabbath holy. Okay. Now, Jewish tradition inaugurates almost all sacred times with blessings over wine. Yom Kippur is the only exception that I can think of. The wine, well, other facets. The wine to which the young woman in the Song of Songs compares her lover's kisses, symbolizes divine wisdom, according to the 12th century Castilian mystic Ezra of Gerona. Jewish mystical tradition suggests that Shabbat is the time of week when the light of that wisdom flows most abundantly into our material realm. Jewish lore compares the Torah, after all, the essential expression of divine wisdom, to water, the physical substance that, apart from its component oxygen, is most essential to sustaining life. So there we have the mystical ideas underlying Kiddush, and to which we'll return in a moment as we look at the paintings. Looking at the mysticism, you might expect that reciting Kiddush would also be a special prerogative of women, but that, of course, has not been the primary custom in traditional Jewish homes across the centuries. Prevailing custom, in fact, has had the man of the house, the Baal Habayit, lead Kiddush on behalf of all present at the table. And in many circles, there are questions about whether a woman can do so at all. Now, Rachel Berkovitz, the celebrated rabbinic scholar at Pardes in Jerusalem, offers a carefully researched analysis of this question in Jofa's 2015 Tashma compilation. If you don't have it, it's well worth getting hold of, exploring a wide variety of analyses and opinions by rabbinic scholars from across all periods of Jewish history across the world. Sanctifying Shabbat, which Kiddush does, is a biblical mitzvah equally contingent upon men and women. And all the rabbinic sources Berkovitz presents concur that women are equally obligated as men to hear Kiddush. While there's indeed been active rabbinic debate about whether women can lead Kiddush at the table for men, she cites leading sources that do permit this, ending her discussion with the opinion of the late 19th century Lithuanian authority, Rav Yechiel Epstein, who is known as the Aruch HaShulchan. Given that women are obligated by the Torah to sanctify the Shabbat, he writes, all of Israel is responsible for one another. Therefore, a man and a woman can fulfill for each other in any situation. And there is someone who wants to say that women are not in the category of responsibility, and this is an astonishing thing. Citing a Talmudic authority, he goes on to say that since women bear the obligation of sanctification, in what she is obligated, she's completely equal to a man. So women can make Kiddush. My illuminations of Friday night Kiddush, one of the key rituals with which Jewish tradition sanctifies Shabbat in the home, express the mystical metaphor of the wine's translation of divine wisdom into the material world. The micrographic text bordering the two paintings presents the passage from Proverbs 8 that we read before about the woman, wisdom, as God's oldest companion. At right, the Hebrew illumination plays with the image of the wine fountains with which many of us share Kiddush with family and friends at our tables. These cups, though, are not arrayed on tiered trays that pipe wine from the central cup at top into those at the lower levels. And this wine is much more than fermented grape juice. Instead, here the wine overflows from one level to the next, following the Kabbalistic metaphor that describes how divine wisdom flows from the highest, most hidden aspects of God downward until it reaches the material world, here transforming to water. And Ezra of Gerona likened divine wisdom to water. See, fear of the Lord is wisdom. He's quoting Job. For wisdom, chokhmah, is the Holy One's quality of goodness, all existing, going forth and being emanated from the luminescence of wisdom and continually blessed through it without cessation. Because their origin is from it, it provides the essence of their sustenance. The remaining Sefirot possess but one request towards which the entirety of their desire is directed, that is, to ascend and enter into the sacred sanctuary, to draw water from the honored fonts of wisdom. Now, here, the vessels through which the wine flows symbolize the 10 Sefirot, or emanations of God, and the mystical tradition assigns each one a characteristic color, and that's how I've painted the 10 cups. Their pyramid arrangement, alludes to the human understanding of order in the universe. Now, why do I care about the order of the universe here? An important aspect of this project to me, in fact, an important way for us moderns to understand Kabbalat Shabbat altogether, and a whole other talk, is the similarity of fundamental questions of the unity of all matter in Kabbalah to the unity of all matter in modern physics and cosmology. So here, just as the Kabbalistic system ascribes the number 10 cosmic significance, obviously the 10 Sefirot, Pythagorean philosophy, which was the origin of Western mathematics, also regarded the number 10 as holy and considered the tetractys, the pyramid formed by the generators of geometric dimensions, more about that in a second, in which I've arranged the cups, as emblematic of the unity of the universe. The 4 levels of this Pythagorean pyramid trace the development of geometric form as follows. If you look at the top of the single cup at the first level, offers a single element that establishes a single point. The second level, with 2 cups, is composed of 2 points determining a line. Level 3 has 3 points, 3 cups, determining a plane. And finally, level 4 includes 4 points necessary to determine a tetrahedron, the simplest 3-dimensional form or space. Flowing down from the cups, the wine transforms into water that continues to flow down into the material world, tumbling over boulders, maybe into a mountain stream. Ezra of Gerona also compared rough boulders to wisdom. So why does wisdom remind this mystic of rocks? The stony cracks and fissures, like I show here, symbolize for him the task of looking for wisdom in hidden, hard places, and don't we all know that? The English painting at left offers an image of a single brimming family Kiddush cup, bearing not only the wine, but also imagery suggesting another aspect of the Shabbat whose holiness we recognize with that wine. The Zohar compares the Shekhinah, the feminine emanation closest to the material realm, to a field of holy apples. And on Friday, this was a favorite image of Yitzchak Luria. And on Friday night, the king is joined with the Sabbath bride. The holy field is fertilized. And from their sacred union, the souls of the righteous are produced. And the 18 apples growing on the 2 trees remind us, of course, of the numerical equivalent of the word chai, life. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, one of the favorite ways we channel wisdom and skill and divine blessing into the world on Shabbat is, of course, food. Challah is not only the first thing we eat at the Shabbat dinner, but the bread symbolizes all the bounty of the feast. And the act of baking it most weeks is part of my own spiritual preparation for Shabbat. At right, I'm showing you a meditation and painting about the act of kneading the challah dough. And you can see in the bottom left corner a little blob of dividing yeast cells, that little bit of microbiology that defines bread. Above and below the painting, you'll see a little meditation about the spiritual significance of kneading the dough, a remarkable find for me, since these are the words of my ancestor, Pearl, the wife of the early Hasidic master, Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. At left, the blessing itself surrounds an image expressing the mystical significance of the act of breaking the bread. The shadowy winged images represent the seraphim, who, as you'll read, mystics suggest attend the feast. You'll find more about the mystical and halachic significance of the challah in the book. But the 2 loaves are set within a view of the hills of Yehuda burgeoning with the wheat harvest, and the deep cosmos, which throughout this work suggests the all-suffusing divine. Now, let's note here that while my ancestor Pearl meditated about the Kavanah, I'm not actually sure you can read it in these slides, so it's only a couple of lines. Let me find it in the book and just read it to you. Give me just a moment. Okay. She says, Master of the world, I ask of you, please help me, such that when my Levi Yitzchak recites the blessing over these loaves on Shabbat, he should have in his heart the same meditations that I have at this time as I knead and bake. So she meditates about her husband's kavanah. I, though, like many modern Orthodox women, make motzi myself on behalf of all at the table. The question arises, however, about whether it's in fact halachically permissible for a woman to make motzi on behalf of men as well as women. Rachel Berkovitz analyzes the complex rabbinics on this question as well in Tashma. Now, there's no question among halachic authorities that women, like men, are obliged to partake of the 3 Shabbat meals, dinner, lunch, and late afternoon Suda Shlishit, and before each meal to perform the ritual hand washing with its blessing, and to recite or hear the motzi over 2 chalot. The sources don't, though, directly address the permissibility of women making motzi on behalf of men. However, as we saw, it has been established that women can make kiddush for men. Similarly, Berkovitz writes, since normative practice is that one can perform a mitzvah in which one is obligated on behalf of others, and women are required to wash and bless when eating bread, then women may clearly recite hamotzi on behalf of men and or other women who are eating bread at the same meal. So we, like the figure of wisdom who joins the divine and material spheres, usher divine love and wisdom into our homes and embody the Shabbat Queen as she fills our synagogues and homes and brings us all spiritual and material sustenance and joy as dusk falls on Friday evening. Last slide, please. Thanks. In just a moment, I'd love to take questions from you, and that I hope you've emailed to Shira. I really do hope that you'll want to bring these paintings and ideas into your home. That looks great. Into your home to share with your families and guests around your Shabbat table. And in fact, I worked very hard to make this book affordable. Kabbalat Shabbat, the Grand Unification, is widely available through online and brick and mortars book sources. And I've also developed a bencher version so that all at table can enjoy the artwork and participate in discussion. Through the Chagim, I'm offering here a 10% discount on both the hardback and the benchers through the website here. Click on the purchase button that you see on the book's webpage, and you'll be directed to the correct spot on my distributor site, and then just enter the promo code JOFA, J-O-F-A, to check out. So now, questions, and please, please don't be shy. Okay.
I'm here. I'm just coming back to the screen.
Lovely.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I just want to add that for anybody who is on JOFA's listserv, I did send out the link along with the reminder for the webinar. So if you're interested in purchasing a copy, feel free to follow the link that's in that email.
Great.
Okay, so I have a couple questions that were submitted earlier before we started the webinar. Mm-hmm. One of those questions is, to what extent do traditional translations of prayer books reflect this feminine personification of wisdom?
There are a couple of prongs to that answer. In the straight translations themselves, it depends upon what word they're using. And I honestly can't really answer that. It depends upon whether they, as a pronoun for wisdom, they use it or her or what. So that I can't speak for. However, there are certainly there are several piyutim in the service that are explicit, that have very, very strong erotic currents to them. And there is no question that the Shekhinah or wisdom in them is presented as a woman. It's very heterosexual language. And there's no question about that. that is, but apart from that, it's more in the background theology. So I hope that answers.
Great.
Okay.
And then there's another question we've got.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked if you have a modern version of Eshet Chayil. There's a modern translation or modern text.
Well, the translation that is in my book is a brand new one. It was done about 1.5 years ago for this book, and it's perfectly modern. But I wonder whether the questioner is actually asking whether there has been an updated version of this idea of Eshet Chayil. That I have not seen. There very well may be. I have not seen them. It's not used. There is not one that's used in the traditional liturgy. It would be an interesting thing to play with. But even if you look at this biblical passage, at this passage from Proverbs that we recite as Eshet Chayil, there are remarkably modern ideas in it. It's about a woman who is out in the world. She is not simply, sucking. This is not Kinderkuche Kirche. She's out in the world. And she's raising her family. She runs a business and she's raising a family. And I think it's a strikingly, relevant view of the woman. In fact, until I understood it better when I began studying for this project, I was actually rather disgusted or rather turned off by the fact that it did talk so much about this material stuff, this business out in the world, rather than more about her what we would call her wisdom and her moral virtues and her learning and all that jazz. But if you look at it as a whole, representing her worldly skills and her moral wisdom, it's really it's a remarkably modern text, despite its age.
I would agree with that. I was thinking about this while throughout the webinar that there came a point for me where I started to become frustrated with Eshet Chayil as a text, and this probably coincided with me becoming a feminist and hearing. I would get frustrated with the text, and then in my senior year of college, I sat down with a friend to do a class on the text. And I came back to the text and I was reading it and I realized that this text actually has a lot of feminist values there. And for women in the modern world who are struggling so hard to find places in Tanakh where we can, see female role models and look up to women.
This is right there.
Exactly. This is a woman, as you said, she's doing it all. She's working the second shift in many ways. Right. So whether, you say, even if you were to say that like, it's problematic that she's doing so many different things at the same time, which I think if we're being honest, the problem is not that it's a woman who's not doing anything. It's a problem of a woman who's trying to do everything.
Right.
And I think in so many ways, that's exactly what we can identify with. And I actually find it quite comforting now to realize there's a text that really speaks to those things.
I mean, I think the bigger problem is that the image of this all-competent woman in Eshet Chayil is presented as the exception. As I said, Eshet Chayil, me and Sa, who can find one? Because that, as I said, that very chapter begins with a picture of women being responsible for men's dissolution, for drunkenness and bad behavior. That seems to have been a prevalent idea of the risks of too much engagement with women. It's and that's a problem. That's a problem. There were certainly women who were out in the world and doing real things and raising good families and all the right stuff in that era. So that sort of that image of woman as a problem is, to me, a problem. The woman of Eshet Chayil really is not.
Right. She's the solution in many ways.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
More questions?
I don't have any other listener questions at the moment. Were there any other details of the book that you you want to share, or any anecdotes? I loved how many anecdotes you brought up throughout, and that you were talking about how personal this work was for you, and how connected it is to your own Shabbat table, but also to your grandmother.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, our Shabbat observance for many of us, many of us have come to it anew, but many of us have grown up with this, and have generations and generations of family stories about Shabbat observance. And I come from an old rabbinic and scholarly family, and my grandmother truly was the Eshet Chayil. The last thing in the world. I was living in San Diego. She passed away in Montreal. I was not allowed to go and be with her over her last days. She did not want to see anyone other than my mother and uncle. Sleeping was the last thing I was going to do the night that she passed away. And so yes, I stayed up all night working on what eventually became the prototype for these paintings, using the oak tree image. That version, though, was a paper cut that's now on the wall of my mother's guest room in Montreal. But yeah, very, very, very powerful example. And the dining room table that I have, where we gather for Shabbat now, was built for her in London in the 20s. My 2-month-old granddaughter will be the 6th generation of us, is the beginning of the 6th generation of us to sit around that table. So family traditions matter hugely. So it's really wonderful to be able to bring them out in this book.
Yes.
So what else can I tell you? The book's been fascinating. I came, as I said, I come from a family descended from the Berditchev Rav. But in recent generations, the perspective turned more rational than mystical in the family. And this project has been a rediscovery of that background for me. And it's been a really fascinating process that I really never expected to get into. When I began, my work in illuminated manuscripts is not my first career. And when I began it, I was very seriously turned off by the real sloppy abuse that I saw Jewish mysticism being put to in the arts community right around me, and saw it everywhere. And I had decided that I was not going to touch Kabbalah until I was willing to really pour myself into its study and do it seriously. And this project has been an occasion for that. So it's been a real blessing. And then to boot, early in this project, I met and married my second husband, who is deeply engaged in Kabbalistic study and very much the Chassid. And so it's been a real joy to be able to bounce ideas off of him and learn from him as I immerse myself in this. So it's been lovely. It's been lovely.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful webinar. Another installment in our regular series. I'm really glad that we could do this.
Thank you.
And again, to anybody who's watching, you can purchase a copy of the Grand Unification online. You can visit. I'm happy to put the link up on our Facebook page or on our website.
And not just, you can buy you can stock up on copies as gifts if you like it too.
It sounds like a great gift.
No limits. Yeah. So anyway, I hope you all enjoy.
Yes, I did. And I'm certain that other people did too. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you. Great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.